never thought the hardest part of losing my husband would be fighting the living, not mourning the dead. But there I was, standing at Marcus's grave on a cold November morning, placing white lilies on the fresh earth, while the woman beside me, his sister Jennifer, was already calculating how to erase me from the life we'd built together. Some monsters don't look like monsters. Some wear black to funerals and cry real tears while planning your destruction. The truth is, grief makes you blind. It makes you trust people you shouldn't. It makes you believe that family means safety when sometimes family is just another word for betrayal wearing a familiar face. Marcus died 3 months after our 5th wedding anniversary. A brain aneurysm, sudden and cruel. The kind of death that doesn't give you time to say goodbye or make peace with the universe. One moment he was laughing at dinner, telling me about a project at work, planning our summer vacation. The next moment he collapsed, and 48 hours later, I was signing papers to turn off life support while his family stood around me, like vultures circling something wounded. I was 29 years old, and my entire world had just disappeared. Jennifer was 34, Marcus's older sister by 5 years. Before his death, we'd had a cordial but distant relationship. She lived 2 hours away, worked in finance, visited on holidays, sent birthday cards with generic messages. We were family by marriage, not by choice, and that had always been fine. We didn't need to be best friends. We just needed to be civil at Thanksgiving. But something changed the day Marcus died. Something I didn't see coming. She was at the hospital within an hour of getting my call. She held my hand while I cried. She made phone calls when I couldn't speak. She coordinated with the funeral home, organized the service, fielded questions from relatives I didn't have the strength to face. Jennifer became the strong one, the capable one, the person holding everything together while I fell apart. At the funeral, she stood next to me like a guardian, her arm around my shoulders, shielding me from the endless parade of mourners who wanted to hug me and tell me everything happens for a reason. She whispered reassurances, brought me tissues, made sure I ate something even when food tasted like ash in my mouth. "You're not alone, Emma," she told me that day, her voice breaking with what sounded like genuine emotion. "Marcus would want me to take care of you. You're my sister now, and sisters look out for each other. Always." I believed her because I desperately needed to believe someone cared whether I survived this. My own parents had retired to Florida 3 years earlier, and while they loved me, they were dealing with my father's health issues and couldn't just drop everything to move back. I had friends, but they had their own lives, their own families, their own problems. Jennifer's offer of unconditional support felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in an ocean of grief. The first week after the funeral, she stayed at my house. She slept in the guest room, made breakfast, sorted through sympathy cards, helped me begin the impossible task of going through Marcus's belongings. She was patient when I broke down crying over his favorite coffee mug. She was understanding when I couldn't sleep and wandered the house at 3 in the morning, looking for traces of him in every corner. "Take your time," she kept saying. "There's no rush. Grief doesn't have a schedule." She seemed so wise, so compassionate, so completely committed to helping me survive. I started to think that maybe this tragedy had brought us together. That maybe something good could come from something so terrible. Maybe Jennifer and I could build a real relationship, become the sisters Marcus would have wanted us to be. I had no idea I was being groomed. The second week, Jennifer started talking about practical matters. Bills that needed to be paid, insurance policies that needed to be claimed, Marcus's affairs that needed to be sorted. I was grateful she was thinking about these things because my brain couldn't hold a coherent thought for longer than 30 seconds. Everything felt fuzzy and distant, like I was watching my life through frosted glass. Marcus had a life insurance policy through his work. She mentioned casually one evening while we were going through paperwork. Did you know about that? I nodded vaguely. Yeah, I think so. He mentioned it once, but I never paid much attention to the details. It's a substantial policy. Emma, $350,000. You're the sole beneficiary. She paused, watching my face. That's a lot of money to manage, especially right now when you're not in the best headspace. The amount shocked me. I had no idea the policy was worth that much. Marcus and I had lived comfortably but modestly on his engineer's salary, and my income as a freelance writer. We'd never talked about life insurance in concrete terms. It was one of those things you get through your employer and forget about because you're young and healthy, and death feels like something that happens to other people. I don't even know how to claim it, I admitted, feeling overwhelmed by the thought of navigating bureaucracy while my brain barely functioned. I can help you with that, Jennifer offered immediately. I deal with financial stuff all the time at my job. Let me handle the paperwork, make the calls, sort through the red tape. You just focus on healing. It seemed reasonable. It seemed kind. It seemed like exactly what a caring sister-in-law would offer to do. I said yes. That was my first mistake, but it wouldn't be my last. Jennifer took over everything with impressive efficiency. She filed the life insurance claim, gathered all the necessary documentation, followed up with the insurance company, handled every detail. Within 6 weeks, the money was deposited into my bank account, and Jennifer was there to help me make smart decisions about the future. This money is your security, she told me seriously, sitting at my kitchen table with financial printouts spread between us. You need to be careful with it. Don't make any impulsive decisions. Let me help you invest it properly so it can grow and support you for years to come. She recommended a financial advisor, a colleague of hers named Richard, who specialized in wealth management. She set up the meeting, came with me, sat beside me while Richard explained investment strategies I barely understood. My brain was still foggy with grief, and the complex financial terminology washed over me like a foreign language. Just trust Richard, Jennifer assured me when I looked confused. He's the best in the business. He'll make sure your money is working for you. I signed the papers Richard put in front of me, authorizing him to manage the life insurance money and the modest savings Marcus and I had accumulated. It felt responsible, adult, like something Marcus would have wanted me to do, rather than letting the money sit in a regular checking account earning nothing. Jennifer seemed proud of me for being so sensible despite my grief. She hugged me after the meeting and told me Marcus would be proud too. But there was something else happening that I didn't see. Something quiet and invisible, like termites eating away at the foundation of a house while the walls still look solid. Jennifer started coming by my house every day. At first, it seemed supportive. She'd bring groceries, cook dinner, keep me company so I wouldn't be alone with my thoughts. But gradually, subtly, she started making suggestions about my life that felt less like advice and more like instructions. "This house is too big for you alone," she said one evening, looking around the 3-bedroom home Marcus and I had bought 2 years earlier. "It must be so expensive to maintain. And everywhere you look, there are memories that keep you stuck in the past. Have you thought about selling it? Getting something smaller, easier, less painful?" I hadn't thought about it, but once she planted the seed, it started to grow. She was right that every room held memories. The kitchen where Marcus and I cooked together. The living room where we watched movies curled up on the couch. The bedroom where we'd made love and talked about our future and planned the family we'd never get to have. Being in the house without him was like living in a museum dedicated to everything I'd lost. "Maybe you're right," I said slowly. "Maybe a fresh start would be good. Jennifer's eyes lit up with something I thought was encouragement. I can help you with that too. I know a real estate agent who can get you top dollar for this place. And I can help you find an apartment, something modern and easy to maintain. Something that's yours, not yours and Marcus's. Within 2 months of Marcus's death, my house was on the market. Jennifer's real estate agent friend, a sharp woman named Diane, listed it at what she said was a competitive price. The house sold quickly, and I netted $210,000 after paying off the remaining mortgage and closing costs, you see, Jennifer said, hugging me on closing day. This is good. This is progress. Marcus would want you to move forward, not stay frozen in the past. She helped me find an apartment. A small 1-bedroom in a modern building downtown. It was sleek and impersonal, nothing like the home Marcus and I had made together. But Jennifer convinced me that was a positive thing. New space, new energy, new beginning, she said as we moved my belongings into the apartment. Most of my furniture didn't fit, so Jennifer helped me sell it or donate it. She was so involved in every decision that it almost felt like she was moving me herself, arranging my life the way she thought it should be arranged. I should have been alarmed by how much control she had taken. I should have noticed that I wasn't making decisions anymore, just agreeing to her suggestions. But grief is disorienting, and having someone else make choices felt easier than trying to navigate the world alone. The money from the house sale went into my investment account, managed by Richard. Between the life insurance and the house, I had over $500,000 being professionally managed. On paper, I was financially secure. In reality, I was starting to feel strangely dependent on Jennifer for everything. She'd become the center of my life, my only social contact, the person I called when I needed anything. She'd replaced Marcus, my friends, my independence, and I didn't even realize it was happening. 3 months after Marcus's death, Jennifer brought up his business. Marcus had been a co-owner of a small software development company with 2 partners, Steve and Aaron. They'd started the company together 5 years earlier, and it had grown into a modest success. Marcus's share was worth approximately $250,000, according to the partnership agreement. Have you heard from Steve and Aaron? Jennifer asked one evening over dinner at her apartment. She'd started inviting me over regularly, cooking elaborate meals, making sure I wasn't eating alone. They came to the funeral, I said. They sent flowers. They called a few times to check on me. But I haven't really talked to them about business stuff. Jennifer's expression darkened. That concerns me, Emma. These guys were Marcus's partners, but they're also businessmen. Without Marcus there to protect your interests, they might try to push you out or undervalue your share. I don't think Steve and Aaron would do that. They were Marcus's best friends. Friends and business are different things, Jennifer said sharply. You need to protect yourself. You need to make sure you're getting fair value for Marcus's share of that company. She convinced me to let her reach out to Steve and Aaron on my behalf, to initiate discussions about buying out my share. I didn't want to deal with it myself. Didn't want to have painful conversations about Marcus's business with men who reminded me of everything he'd lost. So I agreed, grateful that Jennifer was willing to handle it. That was my second major mistake. Jennifer negotiated with Steve and Aaron for weeks. She wouldn't let me join the discussions, insisting it was better if she handled it as my representative, so they couldn't manipulate my emotions. She reported back to me regularly, telling me they were being difficult, trying to lowball the value, arguing that the business wasn't worth as much as the partnership agreement suggested. They're trying to cheat you, she said, her voice filled with righteous anger. They think because you're grieving and don't understand business, they can steal what Marcus built. But I won't let them do that to you. Eventually, She negotiated what she called a fair settlement. Steve and Aaron would buy out my share for $175,000, payable immediately. It was less than the partnership agreement value, but Jennifer explained that the agreement was based on projected future earnings that weren't guaranteed. This is cash in hand, Emma, secure money you can invest and build on. Better than holding onto a share of a business you don't understand and can't manage. I signed the buyout agreement. The money went into my investment account, and another piece of Marcus's life, another connection to who he'd been and what he'd built, disappeared. I didn't know until much later that Jennifer had told Steve and Aaron I was emotionally unstable and desperate to sever all connections to Marcus's past. I didn't know she'd convinced them I needed quick cash and wouldn't fight for full value. I didn't know the business was actually thriving, and Marcus's share was worth closer to $350,000. I didn't know a lot of things because I'd stopped asking questions. I'd stopped thinking for myself. I let Jennifer become my brain, my decision maker, my entire support system. And that was exactly what she wanted. For months after Marcus's death, I realized I hadn't seen my friends in weeks, hadn't returned calls from people who tried to check on me, hadn't maintained any relationships outside of Jennifer. When I mentioned this, she had an explanation ready. Those people didn't really care about you, Emma. If they did, they'd have been here for you like I have. Real friends don't disappear when things get hard. They just wanted to be around when your life was fun and easy. Now that you're going through something difficult, they've shown their true colors. It made sense in the distorted logic of grief. Some friends had stopped calling after I didn't return their initial messages. Some had probably assumed I needed space. But Jennifer reframed their absence as abandonment. And I believed her because it fit the narrative of loss that had consumed my life. She became my only friend, my only family, my only connection to the world. And slowly, quietly, without me noticing, she'd positioned herself as the sole person I trusted, with every aspect of my existence. That's when things started to shift in ways that should have alarmed me, but DIDN single quotes T. Jennifer began making comments about my spending. Small things at first. Observations about buying expensive coffee or ordering takeout instead of cooking. Then bigger concerns about my lifestyle, my choices, my inability to properly manage my finances despite Richard's professional guidance. "I'm worried about you," she said one evening, her face full of concern. "You're not thinking clearly. You're making impulsive decisions. The grief is affecting your judgment, and I'm scared you're going to waste everything Marcus left you." "I'm not wasting anything," I protested weakly. "I'm just trying to live. Living is one thing. Being reckless is another." She pulled out some bank statements, and I wondered vaguely how she'd gotten them before remembering I'd given her access to help me manage bills and paperwork. "Look at this. You're spending way more than you should. At this rate, you'll burn through your savings in a few years." The numbers on the statements did look concerning, but I couldn't make sense of them. My brain still felt foggy, still couldn't focus on details like math and budgets and financial planning. I relied on Jennifer to interpret reality for me, and she was telling me I was failing. What should I do? I asked, feeling helpless and frightened. "Let me help you more directly. Give me power of attorney so I can make financial decisions when you're not thinking clearly. It's temporary, just until you're more stable, just until the grief isn't clouding your judgment so much." I should have said no. I should have recognized this as a massive red flag, a dangerous transfer of power that no one should ask for and no one should give. But I was so tired, so confused, so completely dependent on Jennifer's guidance that signing the power of attorney papers felt like relief, like handing over a burden I couldn't carry anymore. That was my third and most catastrophic mistake. With power of attorney, Jennifer had legal authority to access my accounts, make financial decisions on my behalf, and control virtually every aspect of my financial life. And she wasted no time using the authority in ways I wouldn't discover until it was almost too late. The first thing she did was change my investment strategy with Richard. The money I thought was being conservatively invested in stable, long-term funds was suddenly being moved into high-risk ventures. When I asked Richard about it at a quarterly meeting, he smiled reassuringly. Jennifer and I have discussed a more aggressive approach to maximize your returns. Given your age and financial security, you can afford to take some calculated risks that will pay off significantly in the long run. It sounded reasonable coming from a professional financial advisor. What I didn't know was that Richard wasn't just Jennifer's colleague. He was her boyfriend, had been for 2 years, and they were working together to systematically steal everything I had. The high-risk investments were mostly fictitious. The money was being transferred to offshore accounts, shell companies, and investment vehicles that didn't actually exist. Some of it was being used to fund Jennifer's lifestyle, her expensive downtown condo, her luxury car, her designer clothes. Some was being hidden away for a future I wasn't part of. But I didn't know any of this. I just knew that Jennifer seemed stressed about money more than usual and kept talking about how expensive it was to take care of me, to manage my affairs, to sacrifice her own time and energy to keep me afloat. You don't understand how much I've given up for you, she said one evening after too much wine, her voice sharp with resentment. I have put my entire life on hold to take care of Marcus's widow. My job is suffering. My relationships are suffering. Everything is about you and your grief and your inability to function like an adult. Her words cut deep, filling me with guilt and shame. She was right, I thought. I had become a burden, a responsibility she hadn't asked for but had taken on out of loyalty to her dead brother. The least I could do was be grateful and stop questioning her decisions. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm so sorry I've been such a burden. She softened immediately, hugging me and apologizing for the outburst. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm just stressed. Taking care of you is important to me, Emma, your family. I just need you to trust me and let me do what's best for you, okay? I nodded against her shoulder, feeling small and helpless and completely at her mercy. 6 months after Marcus's death, I'd lost everything that made me myself. My home was gone. My husband's business was sold. My friends had disappeared. My financial independence was an illusion. Even my identity felt like something Jennifer had reshaped into what she wanted me to be. I was living in an apartment I didn't love, eating food Jennifer approved of, wearing clothes she helped me pick out, seeing a therapist she'd recommended who seemed more interested in keeping me dependent than helping me heal. My entire existence revolved around Jennifer's schedule, Jennifer's decisions, Jennifer's vision of who I should be. And I was too deep in grief and manipulation to see what was happening. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 7 months after Marcus died. I was at Jennifer's apartment, which had become more familiar to me than my own. She'd stepped out to take a phone call on the balcony, and I was sitting on her couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when I noticed her laptop open on the coffee table. The screen had gone dark. But when I accidentally bumped the table, it lit up again. And there, filling the screen, was an email thread that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, EM Asset Liquidation Timeline. Final phase. My initials. My assets. I shouldn't have read it. I knew that even in my grief-clouded state, but something primal kicked in, some survival instinct that had been dormant for months. I leaned forward and read the email chain between Jennifer and Richard. Transfer complete on the remaining investment accounts. Total secured $627,000. He remains completely unaware and fully dependent. Therapist confirms continued emotional vulnerability and suggests maintaining current isolation strategy. Recommend proceeding with final real estate liquidation within 60 days to conclude, before any potential clarity emerges. Once complete, can minimize contact and phase out involvement. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely hold the laptop. I scrolled up, reading more messages, each one more devastating than the last. They'd been planning this since before Marcus died. Jennifer had known about his heart condition, had known the risks, and had positioned herself to swoop in the moment he was gone. She'd researched grief psychology, studied how to isolate vulnerable people, learned exactly how to make someone dependent while stealing everything they had. The life insurance money I thought was invested, most of it was gone, transferred to accounts I'd never seen. The house sale proceeds, skimmed and diverted through fake investment fees. Marcus's business buyout. She'd convinced Steve and Aaron to lowball me and had taken a cut of the difference when they'd agreed to buy my share for less than it was worth. Even the apartment I was living in was part of the scheme. Jennifer owned the building through a shell company. My rent was going straight to her, paid with my own money that she controlled through power of attorney. Every single thing she'd done for 7 months had been designed to isolate me, control me, and steal everything Marcus had left to secure my future. The crying at the funeral, the late night talks, the sisterly support, all of it had been performance, manipulation, a carefully executed plan to exploit my grief for financial gain. And the therapist she'd recommended? Reading further, I found emails showing the therapist was reporting back to Jennifer, violating every ethical boundary, providing intel on my mental state to help Jennifer maintain control. I felt physically sick, my stomach heaving as the full scope of the betrayal crashed over me. This woman I trusted, this woman I'd let replace every other relationship in my life, had been systematically destroying me while pretending to save me. I heard Jennifer's footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the laptop, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. When she came back into the room, I forced myself to smile, to act normal, even as rage and horror swirled inside me. "You okay?" she asked, studying my face. "You look pale." "Just tired," I managed. "I think I should head home." She frowned slightly, and I could see her calculating, wondering if something had shifted. But she'd made me so dependent, so apparently fragile, that she couldn't imagine I'd ever fight back. "Okay, sweetie, call me later. We need to discuss some investment opportunities Richard mentioned." I nodded, gathered my things, and left her apartment on shaking legs. The moment I was outside, I leaned against the building and gasped for air, feeling like I'd been holding my breath underwater for 7 months and had finally broken the surface. Everything was clear now, brutally, painfully clear. Jennifer hadn't saved me. She'd been destroying me one piece at a time, and I'd been so lost in grief that I'd helped her do it. But clarity, once it arrives, changes everything. I didn't go home to my apartment. Instead, I went to a coffee shop downtown, ordered black coffee I couldn't taste, and sat in the corner with my laptop. For the first time in 7 months, my mind felt sharp, focused, operating with a precision that grief had stolen from me. I started documenting everything. Every bank statement I could access online, every investment document Richard had sent me, every conversation I could remember. I created a timeline of Jennifer's involvement, marking when each piece of my life had been transferred to her control. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I called Steve and Aaron, Marcus's business partners, Emma, Steve's voice was warm but cautious. How are you? We've been worried. Jennifer told us you needed space. Jennifer told you a lot of things, didn't she? My voice was steadier than I expected. Can we meet? I need to ask you some questions about the buyout. We met that evening at a quiet restaurant. Steve and Aaron looked uncomfortable, like they were bracing for an emotional breakdown. Instead, they got someone they barely recognized. Focused, calm, dangerous. Tell me the truth about the business buyout, I said without preamble. What did Jennifer tell you? They exchanged glances, and Aaron cleared his throat. She said you were struggling emotionally and needed quick cash. She said the business reminded you too much of Marcus and you wanted a clean break. She negotiated hard on the price, but honestly, Emma, we were willing to pay more. She's the one who insisted on settling at $175,000. What would you have paid? Steve looked uncomfortable. The business is doing really well. Based on current earnings and growth projections, Marcus's share is worth at least $350,000, maybe more. So Jennifer had convinced them to lowball me, pocketed the difference somehow, and made me believe I was getting fair value. The betrayal cut deeper with every new revelation. And when I signed the buyout papers, I continued, did you find it strange that you never spoke to me directly? Jennifer said you'd given her power of attorney and preferred to handle everything through her. She's a liar, so it seemed legitimate. Aaron leaned forward. Emma, did something happen? Are you okay? I gave them a brief overview without revealing how bad things really were. Their expressions shifted from confusion to horror to rage as they understood what Jennifer had done. That's fraud, Steve said flatly. Multiple kinds of fraud. Emma, you need a lawyer. Not Jennifer. A real lawyer who works for you. I know, I said, but I need to be smart about this. If I confront her too soon, she'll cover her tracks. I need evidence, documentation, proof of everything she's done. We'll help, Aaron said immediately. We'll provide documentation of the real business value. Testimony about how Jennifer misrepresented your wishes, whatever you need. For the first time in 7 months, I didn't feel alone. And more importantly, I didn't feel helpless. Over the next 3 weeks, I conducted my own investigation while pretending nothing had changed with Jennifer. It was the hardest performance of my life. Smiling and nodding while she talked about new investment strategies. Accepting her advice while secretly documenting her crimes. Hugging her goodbye while fantasizing about the moment I'd reveal I knew everything. I found a liar. A woman named Patricia who specialized in financial exploitation and fraud. When I showed her what I'd discovered, her expression hardened into professional fury. This is one of the most systematic cases of financial abuse I've seen, she said. Flipping through my documentation, power of attorney fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy with the financial advisor, isolation tactics, the fake therapy arrangement. Jennifer has committed multiple felonies. We can not only recover your money, we can put her in prison. I want both, I said quietly. I want every cent back, and I want her to face consequences. Then we need to build an absolutely airtight case before she knows we're coming. Patricia brought in a forensic accountant named David who specialized in tracing hidden assets and fraudulent transfers. Together, they started mapping out exactly where every dollar had gone. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the fake investments, the diverted funds, all of it. They found that Jennifer had stolen approximately $680,000 over 7 months through various schemes. She'd spent about $200,000 on her lifestyle, the condo, the car, luxury purchases. The rest was hidden in accounts I'd never heard of, invested in properties I didn't know existed, stashed away for her future while she'd slowly drained mine. The therapist she'd recommended had been receiving payments from Jennifer to keep me vulnerable. and report on my mental state, a complete violation of medical ethics and patient confidentiality. Those communications alone could cost him his license and open him to criminal charges. Richard, the financial advisor, had been funneling my money into fake investments and pocketing management fees on money that didn't exist. His fraudulent actions could result in decades in prison and complete professional ruin. And Jennifer, the architect of it all, had committed so many overlapping crimes that Patricia started making lists just to keep track. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, abuse of power of attorney, conspiracy, exploitation of a vulnerable person. The charges went on and on. The question, Patricia said during one of our meetings, is how you want to handle this. We can file criminal charges immediately, which might give Jennifer time to hide more assets. Or we can file civil suit first to freeze everything, then bring criminal charges when she can't move money around. What's the approach that causes her the most damage? I asked. Patricia smiled grimly. The most devastating approach would be to coordinate everything to hit simultaneously. Criminal charges, civil lawsuit, complaints to the state bar about her legal ethics violations, complaints to the Financial Regulatory Board about Richard, complaints to the medical board about the therapist. File everything on the same day, freeze all her assets immediately, and watch her entire life collapse at once. How long until we're ready? 2 more weeks to finalize documentation and coordinate with law enforcement. Then that's what we do. During those final 2 weeks, I had to continue pretending everything was normal. I met Jennifer for dinners, listened to her plans for my money, accepted her guidance while knowing exactly what she was really doing. It was excruciating, but it was also empowering in a strange way. She'd spent 7 months making me feel weak, dependent, incapable of surviving without her. Now I was proving to myself that I could not only survive, but fight back with intelligence and precision. Every fake smile, every staged conversation, every performance of helpless dependence was a choice I was making strategically. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The day we filed everything, I woke up early and went through my normal routine. I texted Jennifer good morning like always. I confirmed our lunch plans. I gave her no indication that today would be different from any other day in the past 7 months. At 9 o'clock that morning, criminal charges were filed against Jennifer, Richard, and the therapist. By 9:30, Patricia had filed civil suit seeking full restitution plus damages. By 10, complaints had been submitted to every relevant licensing board and regulatory agency. By 10:30, police had executed a warrant to freeze all of Jennifer's known accounts and assets. By 11, she'd been arrested at her office, led out in handcuffs in front of her colleagues and supervisors. Her career imploding in real time. I watched it unfold from Patricia's office, tracking updates as they came in. Each notification felt like vindication, like justice, like the universe finally balancing scales that had been tipped in Jennifer's favor for too long. My phone started ringing at 11:15. Jennifer, calling from the police station, her voice desperate and shrill. Emma, there's been a terrible mistake. The police arrested me. They're saying I stole from you, but that's insane. I've done nothing but help you. You need to tell them this is wrong. You need to fix this. I can't fix it, Jennifer, I said calmly, because it's not wrong. I know everything. The fake investments, the offshore accounts, the money you stole, the therapist you paid to keep me vulnerable, all of it. The silence on the other end was deafening. How long have you known? She finally whispered. Long enough to build a case that will destroy you completely. Which is exactly what you deserve. Emma, please. We can work this out. I can explain everything. I can pay you back. Just drop the charges. Please, you used my grief as a weapon against me. You stole everything my husband worked to give me. You isolated me, manipulated me, and tried to make me so dependent on you that I'd never realize what you were doing." My voice was steel. "You're going to prison, Jennifer. And when you get out, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you are." I hung up while she was still begging. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. Jennifer's lawyers tried everything, claiming I'd been a willing participant, arguing that power of attorney gave her legal authority to make the decisions she'd made, painting me as mentally unstable and vindictive. But the evidence was overwhelming and the crimes were clear. Richard folded quickly, agreeing to cooperate and testify against Jennifer in exchange for a reduced sentence. He provided documentation of every fraudulent transaction, every fake investment, every scheme they'd planned together. His testimony was devastating. The therapist lost his license immediately and faced separate criminal charges for his role in the conspiracy. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, his future reduced to being a cautionary tale about ethical violations. Steve and Aaron provided testimony about how Jennifer had manipulated the business buyout, documenting the fraud and misrepresentation. Their cooperation helped establish a pattern of systematic deception. The case against Jennifer was so strong that her lawyers eventually recommended she accept a plea deal. In exchange for admitting guilt and agreeing to full restitution, she'd receive a reduced sentence. She refused initially, still believing she could talk her way out of consequences the way she'd talked her way into my life. But as the trial approached and the evidence mounted, reality finally broke through her delusions. She accepted a plea deal, 8 years in prison with possibility of parole after 5. Full restitution of all stolen funds, $680,000 plus interest, and damages. Permanent disbarment from practicing law, a criminal record that would follow her forever. The day of her sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and watched as the judge delivered a statement that echoed everything I felt. "You exploited a grieving widow at the most vulnerable point of her life. You weaponized her trust, her pain, and her need for support to systematically steal everything her deceased husband had worked to provide for her future. This represents not just financial crime, but a profound betrayal of human decency. The court has no sympathy for your circumstances and believes the agreed-upon sentences, if anything, too lenient." Jennifer cried as she was led away in handcuffs. Real tears this time. Not the performance tears she cried at Marcus's funeral while planning my destruction. Tears for herself, for her lost freedom, for consequences she'd never imagined would actually touch her. I felt nothing watching her cry. No satisfaction, no revenge, no pleasure in her pain. Just a quiet sense of justice being served and a chapter finally closing. The money was recovered over the following year as Jennifer's hidden assets were discovered and liquidated. Not all of it. Some had been spent and couldn't be reclaimed, but most of it, nearly $570,000, returned to my accounts, along with damages that brought the total to over $600,000. More importantly, I got my life back. I moved out of the apartment Jennifer owned and found a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing like the home Marcus and I had shared, but something that was mine, chosen by me, for me. I furnished it slowly, deliberately, with pieces that made me happy rather than pieces someone else thought I should have. I reconnected with the friends I'd lost touch with during Jennifer's calculated isolation campaign. Some relationships had been damaged beyond repair, but others welcomed me back with understanding and forgiveness. I learned how to explain what had happened without making excuses for letting it happen in the first place. I found a new therapist, a legitimate one who actually helped me process my grief instead of prolonging it for someone else's benefit. Through her, I learned that my vulnerability hadn't been weakness, it had been a normal response to trauma. Jennifer had exploited that. But the exploitation said everything about her and nothing about me. I started writing again. Not just freelance work, but personal writing. Processing my experience into words that helped me make sense of what had happened. Some of it I kept private. Some one published. Stories about grief and betrayal and the long road back to yourself after someone tries to erase you. And slowly, carefully, I started to live again. A year after Jennifer's sentencing, I visited Marcus's grave for the first time since the funeral. I placed flowers on the headstone and sat in the grass, talking to him the way I used to when he was alive. "Your sister tried to destroy me," I said quietly. "She used your death, used my love for you, used everything sacred between us as tools to steal from me. I let her do it for too long because grief made me weak and trust made me blind." The wind moved through the trees, and I imagined it was his way of listening. But I fought back. "Marcus, I got strong again. I got smart again. I became the person you fell in love with. The person who could stand on her own and fight for herself. I know you would have been proud of that. I know you would have wanted me to be okay, even if the path to okay was harder than either of us ever imagined."